The world is watching the events in the Ukraine. It is tragic and it is criminal. This conflict could have been averted by the actions of President Biden long ago. He is obviously not looking out for the best interests of our country. But it all fits the pattern of the New World Order envisioned by Biden and the megalomaniacs around the world who want a one-world government to be run by them. And of course, each one wants to be the supreme leader. In this, they may seem to be in opposition, but it is only in opposition of who will hold the power, not in opposition to the overall plan for world domination. The situation we are in has been set up to where we've been placed at a disadvantage. The same applies to Western and Central Europe. We must understand that the European Union is, for all practical purposes, run by what we would call communists. And through the EU Commission's edicts and regulations have tied the hands of the European nations from being completely independent. You hear a great deal about the fact that Europe is dependent on Russia for natural gas and oil. They are also dependent, as in the case of Poland, on Russian coal. Poland has the largest reserves of coal of any Western and Central European country, yet they cannot use them because of the taxing system imposed by the European Union. It is therefore cheaper to import coal from Russia rather than to use their own coal. We've been told that many of the conservative leaders of Poland are actually old Soviet agents disguised as conservatives. This was the plan all along, as a result of the so-called collapse of the Soviet Union, as exposed years in advance by Anatoliy Golitsyn in his book, New Lies for Old. He named all of the communist leaders that would pretend to be new anti-communists to fool the American people into believing that communism was dead. Golitsyn was a defector from Russia who worked in the planning department of the secret police, the KGB. And so he knew of their plans to pretend that communism collapsed in order to unite Europe into a communist-run system. His book was published 5 years before the Berlin Wall came down. Few people paid any attention to his revelations. Had they, we would not be in the mess we are today. Gorbachev called the European Union the new European Soviet. But the John Birch Society was trying to inform the people of these problems back then as well, and sustained vicious attacks by the neocons as a result. So here we are, witnessing the gradual rebuilding of the Russian Empire under communism, and the unifying of Europe into the European Union and NATO. It all fits the overall strategy of the world being divided into 3 major zones run by Russia, China, and the United States. Everything we are witnessing by Biden and the leaders of Russia and China fit this mold. In our book, Benedict Biden, we expose the fact that Biden has long supported the New World Order, even using that name, and doing so to fit into the United Nations. What he is doing is not following the orders of some shadowy group in the White House. He's doing exactly what he has put into print in the past, particularly in the year 1992. Read it for yourself in this book, Benedict Biden. He was married in the United Nations chapel, and then honeymooned behind the Iron Curtain, and has never looked back. It would be relatively easy to have stopped the invasion of the Ukraine and still be the case if certain things were put into place. 1. Stop purchasing oil from Russia and Iran, and we mean the United States. We're doing just that every month to make up for the shortfalls deliberately produced by the Biden policy of shutting down oil production. And it is financing the Ukrainian invasion to the tune of over 500,000 barrels of oil per day. 2. Bring back American oil production and supply Europe as well as ourselves. We have well over 100 years' supply of oil, and that does not include any exploration that's been cut off by the Biden policy. 3. Impose restrictions on American strategic materials and intellectual property from being exported to Russia and China. If we were to directly help the Ukraine, it should have been done a long time ago. Getting war material into that country today will be very difficult and perhaps too little too late. And speaking of China, the John Birch Society has forever been trying to tell people that China and Russia are fast allies. The idea that they've been rivals has been propaganda to convince people that we can play one against the other if we just trade with one or the other. There's been too much evidence that they've been allies since the days of Mao. But the neocons and communists within our leadership structure have done all they could to stop any exposure of these facts and portray the John Birch Society as simplistic and ignorant of foreign policy. The original plan by the Master Conspiracy was for the Eurasian continent to be divided between Russia and China, the Western Hemisphere to be run by the United States. This has changed somewhat due to the fact of the enormous disparity between the United States and the rest of the world. Due to the liberty of the American system, we've grown to be the most powerful country on earth, and so the original plan has been somewhat altered to make the division more balanced. Again, these entities, A, B, and C, will be engaged at some point in perpetual war with revolving alliances until the people grow so tired of war they will agree to a one-world government as the solution to war, at which time the boot of totalitarianism will descend around the entire globe. At least that's the plan. They've been thwarted in these plans due to a number of factors, including the fact that the megalomaniacs cannot get along, and each one wants to be the leader prematurely. And even more important, the education and action program of the John Birch Society has a great deal to do with them losing their deadlines in America. But that's a story for another time. The main message that we want to convey is that what you see unfolding is the open unification of the western half of the Eurasian continent. Our own government may appear finally to do something to stop what is happening, but far too slowly to actually make a difference. It will be made to appear that the Biden administration is doing something effective, and so will cause the public support for him to start to rise in the polls in time for the midterm elections. How much will determine how these elections turn out. Europe will be one more step towards unification by first regionalizing Western Europe in the face of the aggression of the Russian bear. This should not deter us from continuing on with what we're doing, first by working to make sure that our elections are fair and open, and educating people as to the dangers of the United Nations and other foreign entanglements.